Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Krame Center for Mindful Living. Welcome back to those of you who are a regular part of our mindfulness community and meditation group, and a warm welcome to anyone who is joining us for the first time. So just a little bit about us. We are a global nonprofit organization whose mission is to make the benefits of mindfulness, self-compassion, and positive psychology accessible to all. Our goal is really to help people become more resilient and live better lives through our various programs. We offer affordable pricing and scholarships, as well as these free weekly meditations. And our continuing theme for March and April is Spring into Resilience. And today we're going to talk about being the benefit finder. So this week we will explore how being a benefit finder can give us a new perspective and ultimately change how we experience our lives. When we intentionally choose to be a benefit finder, we can turn even a disappointment or failure into a growth point. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, to the different minds, the same world is a hell and a heaven, right? So this really implies that our interpretation and our outlook is largely responsible for how we experience our lives. And it's subjective. So maintaining a positive focus is so important. And then another well-known psychologist, Ed Diener, says, it appears that the way people perceive the world is much more important to happiness than objective circumstances. So resilience and balance is really much more contingent on our state of mind than the circumstances of a situation. You know, it's more about what we choose to focus on, right? So two people can experience the exact same thing, and one will view it as a failure and disappointment, and the other one can view it as a win, right? One will view it as a disaster, and the other one will view it as an opportunity to learn, a growth experience, or even a stepping stone. We don't realize the important role we play in creating our own reality, right? We are in essence co-creators and have a tremendous influence on how we experience our world, right? So let's not forget that. At the extremes, of course, external circumstances do make a difference. But beyond extreme circumstances, objective circumstances have very little to do with our resilience, with our well-being, and even with our happiness. And there are two basic kinds of people, the fault finder and the benefit finder. And of course, you know, it's not absolute. We're not one or the other, because we can kind of vacillate between the two. The fault finder will find faults even in paradise, said Henry David Thoreau. So it's the idea, if you seek the negative, you shall find it. When continually finding the negative in a situation, the mental state of learned helplessness is often a byproduct. And learned helplessness occurs when we become, through our own behavior, conditioned to believe that a bad situation is unchangeable or inescapable. Fault finders continue to believe that the problems are always out there and they are insurmountable. And let's just recognize that benefit finding is not about ignoring the faults, and because that would be detachment from reality, and that is unhealthy too. As humans, we tend to have an imbalance towards the negative. You know, we've often spoken about the negativity bias in our meditations, and Rick Hansen sums it up well in his quote, "The mind is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones." Right? Because we can easily tend to dismiss the positive while clinging to the negative. So we need to intentionally choose to look at the bright side and ask ourselves, what can I learn from the experience? Reality is comprised of both subjective interpretation and the objective circumstances. The reality of a situation is a balance between both. And I love what Ann Harbison, another psychologist, says: never let a good crisis go to waste. And this is the attitude of a benefit finder. And there's been research that shows that some people experience PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, while others will experience post-traumatic growth. And much of it has to do with looking for the silver lining, the growth point, or the positive in even the greatest challenges, right? In other words, so being the benefit finder, because we can often learn and grow even from the crucibles in our lives. Also important in this equation is the research that has identified what's called a growth mindset, which means that you believe your intelligence and talents can be developed over time versus a fixed mindset, which means that you might believe intelligence is fixed. So if you're not good at something, you'll believe you'll never get good at it or be good at it. So the way we think about ourselves and our abilities really shapes our lives. How we think about our intellect and talents not only affects the way we feel, but it can also affect what we achieve, whether we stick to new habits or if we will go on to develop new skills. It also plays into our ability to be a benefit finder and look for the positive in any situation, right? If we have a growth mindset, we're more likely not to be overly critical of ourselves or judgmental, which gives us a greater ability to see the positive, to see the bigger picture, and not personalize a failure, right? So instead of viewing it as having failed at something, viewing it as being a failure is what the fault finder would do, right? So the benefit finder would see, or the person with a growth mindset would see it as having failed at something, not being a failure. And there's a huge difference. And I love this other slogan by Tal Ben-Shahar, learn to fail or fail to learn. And he also says, things don't necessarily happen for the best, but some people are able to make the best of things that happen, right? So once something happens, what matters is how we interpret it and how we choose to view it. So the next time you experience a failure, just pause for a moment and consider, well, how can I learn from it? Or even how can I benefit from it? So is there a silver lining? All right, and so now we are going to move into the formal portion of our meditation. So I'm going to invite you to make any postural adjustments if you need to, adjusting yourself in your seat, maybe giving your neck a stretch or shrugging your shoulders up to the ears, just to kind of invite a sense of ease, if that's possible for you in this moment. And then I'm going to invite you to also close your eyes if that feels right. And if not, maybe simply softening the gaze. And then just taking a moment to begin to settle into the seat that you're sitting in. Maybe allowing yourself a sense of arrival. Maybe there was a transition from the car to home to this meditation, from work to this meditation. And just using that transition point as a way of settling, letting go of whatever it was that came before. And just giving yourself permission to be fully present in this moment. To be here with yourself and for yourself. Maybe even having a sense of gratitude to towards yourself for showing up, for taking time for some needed self care. Maybe just tuning in and noticing if there's been a shift, or noticing if perhaps there is some tension somewhere in the body. Just checking in with yourself. How am I now in this moment? And if you do notice some tension somewhere, whether it's in the forehead or the cheeks or the jaw, or perhaps the neck or shoulders, not needing for it to be any other way, but perhaps just breathing into the area, gently inviting some ease into the tension. And then just allowing yourself to become a little bit heavy in the seat that you're sitting in, softening into the seat cushion. Maybe even noticing how your feet are placed on the floor, and feeling the sit bones in the chair, the hands wherever they are placed, in the lap or the thighs or each other. And allowing those touch points to be a gateway and further grounding into the body, a gateway to being here right now. And if your mind wanders, that's perfectly fine. Just gently, but firmly and with intention, guiding it back to being here in this moment. Inhabiting the body. And then now, as you're ready, turning your attention to the breath. So just following along the rhythm of your own breath cycle. One breath at a time, moment by moment, and breath by breath. So not needing to change it in any way, just following along as if with a good friend, being with the breath, allowing it to be your anchor into your body and into this moment. The only moment that we actually have is this one right now. And then this one. moment by moment. And now, as you're ready, the invitation is to think about a silver lining that you have experienced. So, this is about exploring the concept of turning towards our suffering gently with some curiosity by identifying a past event that was very difficult to bear at the time, yet offered some invaluable life lesson. So, taking a moment to think of a struggle in your own life that seemed very difficult or even impossible to bear at the time. But looking back, you recognize that it taught you an important lesson. But please choose an event that is far enough in the past that it's clearly resolved and you learned what you needed to learn. And so this means that you shouldn't choose a traumatic event that will re traumatize you right now as you think about it. And as you're settling on an event, because several may have arisen, also know that not every dark cloud has a silver lining. And sometimes our triumph is simply to have returned or tried to return to ordinary life. And that's okay too. But for the sake of this meditation, please choose an event that had a silver lining. Whether it was the loss of a job, the circumstances of which led you to a completely new career path and was a great blessing in the end. Or maybe you were in a very untenable living situation and you can now appreciate looking back how much patience you exercised during that time and also recognize that that's when you became a more patient person. Or maybe it was a health issue that completely changed your perspective on life, allowing you to become much more grateful for all the good in your life. And you now recognize how you routinely find yourself practicing gratitude. Or perhaps it was a failed business venture that gave you the experience to create a success in the next endeavor. But at the time, it was devastating that this business failed. So now just reflecting on what was the situation, what was this challenge? And then just calling to mind as many details as possible to remind yourself of what happened, of how it was so difficult to bear. And just holding these details in your awareness and taking a moment to honor the difficulty and how you struggled with it. Having some self compassion in this moment. And if you wish, adding some kind words that validate what you endured. And it could be, oh, that was hard, or this was not your fault. You just didn't know enough to avoid this situation. Or I'm so proud of you for having had the strength to get through it. Just honoring the difficulty of that situation. And if it's helpful, maybe even placing a hand on your chest or over your heart as you're honoring the difficulty that you had to bear at that time. And now I'm going to invite you to reflect on what deeper lesson did this challenge or crisis teach you that you might never have learned otherwise? What deeper lesson did this teach you? Maybe the lesson was to be less impulsive and more thoughtful in your decision making process, which has stead you well. Or maybe a failure forced you to muster up the courage to invest in yourself, believe in yourself, and take a direction that you would otherwise never have taken. Maybe one door closed, but another one opened, and that led to unexpected gains, whether personal growth or financial gains. So just thinking about the lesson learned, experience gained, or new opportunity presenting itself. It was all as a result of this difficulty that you had to bear, this challenge. And then now, as you're ready, letting go of this practice and letting the mind settle, just sitting quietly for a moment with this experience and simply allowing your experience to be just as it is, just as it was, and for you to be just as you are in this moment. And I'm going to end with a poem called Silver Lining by Lo Sit Fong. Though the cloud may be dark, though one sees no way out, it's a temporal passing phase, no state permanent in life. Every cloud has a silver lining. Rainbow comes after heavy rain. In every crisis lies an opportunity for greater things to come. And then now, as you're ready, gently allowing your eyes to open and perhaps just taking a moment to reorient yourself to the space you're in. And when you're ready, bringing your gaze back to the screen. Maybe even taking a stretch, whatever is needed in this moment. I want to thank you for your practice today. Um, and as usual, as we usually do, I have a weekly invitation for you. So I invite you to consciously choose to look for a silver lining in one thing that happens this coming week that you view as a negative event, right? It can be large or small, but the invitation is to practice being the benefit finder. And the more that we practice, the more easily it will come to us to look for the positive and not get stuck focusing on the negative, right? It's all too easy to just get stuck focusing on the negative. So, a couple of announcements. Our spring Mindful Self Compassion course begins April 28th on Thursday evenings from 6:30 to 9 p.m. It will be taught by myself and Sarah Govea. And the spring MBSR course begins May 6th on Friday mornings from 9:30 until noon. And that will be taught by Sarah Govea. All right, once again, thank you all for your practice and be well and take good care. See you soon.